Okay, so hello guys, I'm Luke, and this short presentation will highlight the types of abuse within sport, the grooming process, and different policies and organisations that are in place in order to counteract this. So, without further ado, let's begin. Okay, so does abuse actually occur within a sporting environment? Does abuse happen often within sport? Well, the answer to this, surprisingly to some of you, and unfortunately, is actually yes. Abuse does occur on many occasions within sport. And actually, abuse can occur in many different forms, such as emotional, physical, and sexual. So, how prevalent is abuse within sport? Well, a 2011 study carried out in the UK on over 6,000 students looked at emotional and physical abuse within sport. And results showed that 77% of males and 74% of females suffered from emotional abuse. And 26% of males and 24% of females suffered from physical abuse. Okay, so in addition to this, a study that was carried out on interpersonal violence in sport was recorded in Belgium and the Netherlands. And 4,000 adults who played sport as children were asked if they ever suffered sexual abuse when they were younger. And results showed that 14% said yes, which is approximately 560 people. Okay, so now we've highlighted that abuse occurs in sport and how prevalent it is. Where does grooming come into this? What actually is grooming? Well, grooming is the preparatory act that will allow an individual to gain access to a child with the intent of committing sexual abuse. So inevitably befriending a child and using them. Okay, so offenders can also groom the community, not just the victim and the families of the community, so they seem nice, caring and responsible. And grooming is becoming really prevalent in and outside of sport, particularly online grooming, as cases of online grooming in the last few years have increased by almost 50%. Okay, so we're now going to go into 5 different stages of the grooming process. There are 5 integral stages, which are as followed. Okay, so number 1, identifying the victim. Number 2, gaining access to the child. Number 3, developing a trusting relationship with the child or the victim. And 4, desensitising the child to touch. And stage 5, maintaining control of the relationship. Okay, so we're now going to use some short animations and go into a little more detail on these stages. Okay, so stage 1, identifying the victim. In this stage, perpetrators are known to select their victims due to a number of factors, such as children with low self-esteem, insecurities, a small network of friends, and also it can occur to issues at home, for example, a neglectful household, and potentially one-parent households are what appeal to perpetrators. Okay, so we're now going to move on to stage 2, which is gaining access to the child or the victim. So, within this stage, the perpetrator often tries to get the victim isolated by offering professional one-to-one sessions with it. So within a sporting context, they could offer professional one-to-one sessions to a young child, and their father or parent or guardian would think nothing of it. They would think this person is trying to help them, trying to help their child progress in the sport that they love, and quite often that's not the case. And they will often promise them the world. Okay, so we're now going to move on to stage 3, which is arguably the most integral stage of the process, developing trust in a relationship. Okay, so this is where the perpetrator will offer gifts, they will share secrets together, and be generally a nice and helpful person to the victim. This is where the trust begins to build, because they're being nice, they're being helpful, and they help them out in difficult situations that happen at school or maybe at home or anywhere, anything within their life. And this is when it becomes dangerous, because as soon as the victim starts trusting that person, this is when problems can actually amount and problems can seriously occur, as this is when they go to that person for anything and they feel like they can trust them. Okay, so we're now going to move on to stage 4. This is when the perpetrator will desensitise the child to touch, and this is when the perpetrator will progress with physical contact. So it may start with accidental brushes of the hand, but then eventually it will progress into more serious things. So naked cuddling could be an example, which is not acceptable at all, and eventually the child will be abused. and quite often the child knows they're being abused, but they don't know who to go to because they trust that person and they don't know what's happening. Okay, so stage 5, maintaining the relationship. This is the final stage, and this is when the perpetrator will attempt to keep the situation under control. So they can often use threats, they can often use blackmail and reverse psychology to try and undermine the victim, to try and make the victim feel like this is normal, to try and make the victim feel like it's their fault, so they have nobody to talk to. However, it's actually important to note that the grooming process doesn't have to happen in this order. The stages can be mixed around, they can be flipped over, they can be flipped on the side, they can spend longer in certain stages. It doesn't matter, there's no time limit on the stages and no specific order, but this is the most chronological and the most appropriate order of what does occur. So, now we've covered that, why do perpetrators offend? Why did they actually do it? Well, the truth be told, we are not 100% sure because there are so many different contexts and so many different cases and so many different offences in different manners. However, research has shown that it could be due to a number of factors, such as biological factors. An example of a biological factor could be a potential brain dysfunction within a perpetrator, so therefore they struggle with self-control, urges and cognitive distortions. Environmental factors are also another key area as to why perpetrators offend potentially. And an example of an environmental factor would be childhood experiences and events that have occurred throughout the perpetrator's life that potentially scarred them, especially, and these events happen when human development is essential. Okay, so we're now going to move on to international an international organisation that has been put in place in order to stop abuse as a whole, not just within sport as a whole. Okay, so in 1989, UNICEF, global charity UNICEF, created the United Nations Conventions of the Rights of the Child, also known as the UNCRC. So what is the UNCRC and what do they do? Well, basically, the UNCRC aims to prevent abuse of children, all forms of abuse on children, sexual, physical, through the use of 54 different articles, and several of these articles relate to sport. So the most appropriate could be Article 3, Article 13, best interest of the child, and freedom to express thoughts and opinion. However, many other articles do relate to sport. Every country in the world has signed up to this, other than 2 countries. South Sudan, because it's relatively new, maybe they've not had a chance to, maybe they have. And the other country that hasn't signed up is the United States of America. Okay, so we're now going to move on to the specifics within the UK. So specific policies, procedures, measures that have actually been put in place to stop abuse in sport and outside of sport. Okay, so in 2001, the Child Protection in Sport Unit was created by NSPCC. So what is it? What does it consist of? What is the CPSU? Well, the CPSU works with national governing bodies within sport in the UK, and it aims to reduce the risk of child abuse by working within that community and providing safeguarding officers and helping and working together with the national governing bodies in order to prevent abuse within their sports. And this was created due to a number of high-profile cases, so it's actually only been created after high-profile cases have come out and after children have been abused. Okay, so now moving on to the DBS system, which is the Disclosure and Barring Service. The DBS system was introduced in 2012 and it replaced the Criminal Records Bureau check. So what is a DBS? What is a DBS check? Well, a DBS check prevents people with significant criminal backgrounds and inappropriate backgrounds working with vulnerable adults and children. And they must be renewed every 2 years. And it applies to voluntary, work experience, full and part-time jobs as well. It doesn't matter. As long as you're working with vulnerable adults, then you must have a DBS check. Otherwise, it is not allowed. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to potential limitations of this and what actually happens in reality, sort of thing. Okay, so offenders actually often don't offend until adulthood. Okay, so in relation to the DBS, the checks occur, abuse occurs after the checks have been made. And what constitutes abuse in sport and what doesn't, this is a big factor. So hitting a child in public is not acceptable, whereas in sport, hitting a child because he's not performing well is often actually not as frowned upon as much, sort of thing. So thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed my presentation. I hope it's labelled the grooming processes and the highlights of grooming. And thank you.